Today, we live at a unique point in human history where data is becoming the new currency. Beyond oil, dollars, and social status, data is emerging as one of the most powerful and consequential currencies around the globe. Technology, computer processing, cloud storage, and artificial intelligence are empowering these data to transform zeros and ones into insightful and even profound realizations about almost every aspect of our lives. I'm John Nosta.
And this is FutureDose.Tech with your hosts, Dr. Timothy Aungst and Meghann Chilcott. Technology, pharmacy, and better healthcare delivery. By creating more efficient, higher quality concierge-like pharmacist services, we can transform from the pharmacist of yesterday into the future provider of pharmacy tomorrow. FutureDose.Tech is a member of the Pharmacy Podcast Network, the global leader in pharmacy podcasting and the largest, most influential network of podcasts about the profession and business of pharmacy.
Pharmacy Podcast Network. This is the founder and host of today's podcast and release of our latest show, FutureDose.Tech. So excited about this. We're living in an era of information technology that's been radically transformed by the advent of so many particular facets of technology and has had a deep impact to pharmacy. And I've been paying attention to champions in our industry that I've very much wanted to collaborate with. And I'd like to introduce two very special people to the network. Meghann Chilcott, who is the Senior Vice President of OrderInsite Technologies, and the one and only Dr. Timothy Aungst, who is known as the Digital Apothecary, thedigital.apothecary.com. Welcome to FutureDose.Tech, your show, Tim and Meghann. How are you today?
Doing great. Thank you very much. I'm extremely excited about sharing technology with the industry.
Thanks, Todd. No, I'm really excited about this because, even before you contacted me about this opportunity, I was actually thinking about launching my own podcast and kind of a vlog. So this is going to be a great opportunity to work with Pharmacy Podcast just to get out there and talk about, the different things coming down the pipeline that I'm seeing. And I'd love to share it with all your listeners.
So I'm very curious to the backgrounds of you both and why you gravitated towards pharmacy and technology in both and the coupling of that and what that means and so many curiosities that I'm sure we all have. I'm going to start out with Meghann. Give us a little background on yourself and your role in innovative technology, innovative pharmacy technology solutions.
Thank you. So my background is obviously pharmacy technology. I started out as a pharmacy technician and spent the next, 12 years or so working in the pharmacy technology aspect in retail and specialty pharmacy. So I love implementations and automation, robotics, data reporting. Those tend to be my expertise.
Tim, you're known, obviously, the Digital Apothecary. I've followed your blog for years now. What made you interested in technology and pharmacy together?
Oh, man. Pharmacy for me was not a path I ever actually thought I was going to go down to. I actually was going to become a history and philosophy teacher. That's kind of where I started out. And then I realized there's probably no future in that for me. And that's probably why I'm an academic, because I still like that environment. But I got into pharmacy because I loved healthcare, and actually the thing that gravitated in history and philosophy was a lot of those people used to be apothecaries or an alchemist. And that's kind of where I got the start from it. I was like, okay, let's look into this. And it gravitated into working more into healthcare, more practice, and I started working as an intern at pharmacy and finished pharmacy school. And when I finished pharmacy school, I actually did a residency, and one of the things I was catching up was the whole movement to EHRs, more use of different technological services I could see being offered in the wards. The issue with using electronic systems is quite fascinating to me. In the hospital, I was actually the first one to start doing remote verification orders using my iPad. And that was something that I found amazing. I started reviewing mobile apps with another group called iMedical Apps, served as an editor for them. And then I just started running and communicating with all these different companies through that and started getting the digital health space. And since then, I've been, as a pharmacist, trying to just figure out where do we fall in the grand scheme of these things, because I've seen so many companies and so many products that have come and gone in the past decade. It's amazing. And I think that's just really where I'm kind of at this current time, is what is the next big thing that's going to come down here that's going to really shape our profession? And philosophically, is it going to even keep pharmacy the same way, or do we see a drastic change even with how healthcare is practiced?
It's one thing to have technology and the intention of what it's supposed to do from an efficiency perspective, as well as elevating knowledge, big data, using big data to come to better outcomes with our patients. But as someone that works in technology and is working with pharmacies, Meghann, what's your insights and outside in your overview per se of technology today in pharmacy?
Well, we're at an interesting point with technology today in pharmacy, because we have a lot of different technologies that are available to us, and we're learning how to integrate those into our daily practices. As we start seeing the massive amounts of data that are available, and we can now start overlaying things like machine learning or artificial intelligence. I think that we're going to be seeing some really interesting dynamic shifts over the next few years as our industry finally begins to learn how to use these tools.
When I think of big data, and I've talked to philosophers in the big data space and technology overall, I think of John Nosta and his blogs and his articles in Forbes, which is something, Meghann, that you're very well aware of as a writer of Forbes too. But I think of these data silos and how data is kept in each of the silos, from the electronic health record to the PBMs to other insurers to specialists, and how sometimes the connection between one source to another is held up by the system itself. And I think of that in pharmacy specifically, because I always wondered when I entered pharmacy in 2004 how long it would take for us to really be interconnected. And with your research, as well as your tracking of all of this, Tim, what do you think the gateway, what do you think the silver bullet, or at least something in coupling all of this together, what's it going to take for us to truly be interconnected between systems?
I think historically it comes down to just how pharmacies have been practicing, though, for so long. Because, even we go back to the early chemists, druggists, and then in the start of last century, they were standalone businesses, and pharmacists by and large were entrepreneurs. They owned their own companies. They sourced their own products. They made and compounded and dispensed it. And what that comes down to, though, is the only link was when we got the prescription. That was our connection outside and communication with providers. Outside of that, we were our own entity. And we've, as a profession, I think, have always taken that for granted, that we could always stand alone and be alone and own basically drug distribution and dispensing and all that stuff. The problem with that is also in pharmacy, you see this growing urge for us to become providers or to work within the healthcare space. And that has to come into a give and take. I think one of the biggest examples was the whole vaccination push in the beginning of the 2000s. A lot of providers did not like that. A lot were arguing we would take away business. And I think the data has shown that we have expanded services, more people got vaccinations, but we did steal a little bit of business from some people. And now it's a primary source for a lot of patients to get their vaccinations. But even that, think about that data. Even I hear so much now talk about, I hear providers say, how am I supposed to know if someone goes down the street and gets a vaccination at a pharmacy and they don't even tell me? And it's that lack. So I think it's going to be some accountability comes into play here as we see this push for more clinical outcomes, as we see more push for pharmacists wanting to be involved in patient care process, and hopefully we see expandability codes and such. I think along with that will be coming the whole integration of data across the entire spectrum. And I think that's the missing link, because no one's really seen an urge to merge these two areas, the general healthcare space and pharmacy. until recently, just based on changing professional roles as well. And I think a lot of people are really interested in the data itself and what does that mean, how we can use it to maintain patient safety, but also explore more efficacious outcomes for patient health.
Meghann, you and your customers, your implementation team, experiencing this question or this overview every day. So from your perspective, what are the barriers to interconnection between multiple systems within the healthcare space and how it affects pharmacy providers and, more importantly, our patients?
Well, I would say that one of the biggest barriers is the fact that in your smaller pharmacies, your community pharmacies, they don't have technology resources available to them like a larger chain or a hospital system may. So when it comes to these required data reporting, like pseudoephedrine or immunizations or controlled substances, it's difficult for them to make those leaps in order to satisfy any data requirements. So I would, from my perspective, if we were able to make it one singular system that was accepting all of this information, because essentially they are gathering these same bits of information from different places, then it would allow for the pharmacist to have a better overall picture of what the pharmacy patients are getting on a day-to-day basis. And I kind of mentioned it earlier, Timothy did, that a pharmacist doesn't know that a patient went down the street and picked up a prescription. And the only way they're going to know that is if they built it into their insurance. The fact is that we already have some of these aggregators that are pulling some of this information for the PDMP, for controlled substances. Why not make it across the board for all prescriptions?
As these healthcare systems evolve and the technology evolves and we understand what's happening with mobile, and the new Apple Watch came out with EKG, and there's so many different silos of technology and the facets of what that means to better patient care, evolution of technology, the disruption of new systems that are coming out. It's exciting to me, for someone who has really been a fan of pharmacy for more than 15 years now, and really understanding the technology does elevate the provider and bring us closer together. And then there's challenges. And what's exciting for me is having two champions in the technology space in pharmacy who can share ideas to help our pharmacy providers not only understand better the technology before them, but asking questions of each other of how we can be better interconnected with each other. And sometimes that's not always pharmacy, or sometimes that's not always technology. Sometimes it's not always healthcare. Sometimes it's just reaching out to someone and communicating better. However, this podcast, FutureDose.Tech, is all about the future of technology in the pharmacy space, with the imaginations and no limitations whatsoever in what will be discussed. Tim, what do you have planned for FutureDose.Tech?
I mean, for me personally, you guys can expect to hear a lot of talk about not just what are people doing in the space at this current time, what companies are out there, what they're trying to bring to the field, but also a little bit of futurism. What is coming down the pipeline next 5 to 10 years? I mean, we talk about AI a lot right now, but the reality is it's still in its infancy. That's going to really change a lot. You can also expect to hear people that I'm going to interview and topics we're going to talk about that you may think about maybe aren't really pharmacy directed overall. But the reality is, I look at the healthcare space based on this whole technological innovations going on is more of a collaborative field coming about. So I'm going to be talking to people that will have some say in pharmacy. It may not be their business, but are considering how they can be at play in it. So this may deal beyond like medication adherence companies or drug distribution or even packaging, but they'll turn into what does pharmacogenomics mean, especially with, I suppose, like dietary companies out there, or what is companies like Zelth doing that are trying to bring different discharge service for medication and also for medical services and things like that. Like you'll hear me talk about Uber, you'll hear me talk about different things like this that are coming into play, like Apple, Google, and Amazon. I mean, those are my big targets I'm going to hopefully bring to you guys to listen about and hear and see what you might want to consider in the near future.
What about you, Meghann? What, as someone who really is in this every day and paying attention to what your customers are needing, what they're demanding from technology, what would you like to bring to the Pharmacy Podcast Network from a technological perspective in your discussions?
What I'm expecting to bring is, one, these conversations with the various vendors of what's going to be coming out, which is, obviously what Timothy was saying. But I'd also like to have some of my customers or some peers in the industry who I've worked with for many years discussing their challenges and finding ways that we can solve for them using technology in the pharmacy space.
So the impact of technology on healthcare and pharmacy, it's going to continue to evolve. It's at a pace now that just it's hard to keep up with sometimes, but nonetheless, I'm excited about this. I've been looking forward to a podcast that would center around technology and pharmacy, and very much appreciate the insights of both of you already. Mobility, telemedicine, big data, mobile applications, cloud computing, how many of these sectors we could really dig into. And it's going to be fun to listen to both of you with discussions with each other, but then also discussions with thought leaders in our industry and possibly even bringing people outside of pharmacy to really churn our minds and imaginations. If you're listening to this episode, the very first episode of FutureDose.Tech, please reach out to @PharmacyPodcast in the Twitter sphere. Check out the Digital Apothecary that's thedigitalapothecary.com for much of Tim's writings. And please reach out to Meghann Chilcott. You can find her on LinkedIn, Meghann Chilcott. That's MEGHANN, and Chilcott, CHILCOTT. If you're driving, don't worry. You know that it'll be in the show notes, as well as access to OrderInsite's website. Very excited about the both of you, what you're going to be bringing to the table. Already fans of what you guys have done throughout your careers. And in closing, Tim, what would you like to encourage the listeners to do next in learning more?
Oh man, if you guys have any off-the-wall people you want me to reach out to listen to, if you guys are interested in just the broad spectrum of different companies that are innovating in the digital health space, let me know who I should try reaching, or let's see if we can drum up some more awareness about the fact that pharmacy is interested in this space, and maybe we get more listeners and get more people outside.
And Meghann, in closing, anything to give insights to our listeners with upcoming episodes that you'd like to develop for FutureDose.Tech?
Yeah, I mean, I just would like to say if anyone has any ideas or questions that they have about technology and pharmacy, please pass them along. We'd be very, very happy to help teach individuals some information as well as share for individuals who don't necessarily know what they want to do next in technology.
Well, I thank you both so much for helping us to launch this and reaching our listeners in the Pharmacy Podcast Network. And with that, thank you so much.
Thank you, Todd. Take care.
Thank you, Todd.
FutureDose.Tech. And as always, we thank you for listening to the Pharmacy Podcast Network.
Thank you for listening to FutureDose.Tech. If you enjoyed this episode, please share this podcast on your favorite social media outlets. Be sure to stay connected to the Pharmacy Podcast Network and return for your next FutureDose.Tech episode coming soon.